In the heart of Albuquerque, New Mexico, a frail man named Ethan Cole sat quietly in the hospital waiting room. The air smelled of antiseptic and fear, a cruel reminder that life could be taken away by a clipboard and a signature. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the ache spreading through his chest like slow fire. The doctor had already said the words that changed everything: stage 3 cancer. It wasn't just the disease that crushed him, it was what came next. When Ethan asked about treatment, the clinic administrator gave him a cold, rehearsed smile and said, "Sorry, Mr. Cole. Without full insurance, we can't proceed." The sentence echoed in his mind like a death sentence written on hospital letterhead. Ethan's voice cracked, fragile with desperation. "Please, I just need a chance," he whispered, his eyes pleading for humanity in a system that had none left. But the receptionist turned her head, pretending not to hear, tapping away at her keyboard as if his suffering were an inconvenience. With every step toward the door, Ethan felt the weight of defeat pressing harder against his ribs. The sunlight outside was blinding, hot, merciless. He stumbled toward his old pickup truck, the edges of his vision blurring, breath shallow. The desert wind blew dust across the parking lot as he collapsed beside the driver's door, his body folding into the gravel, one trembling hand clutching his chest. Then came the sound, a deep, distant rumble growing louder by the second. Not thunder. Motorcycles. The roar of a biker gang cut through the silence like a promise of rescue. A group of riders, leather vests gleaming under the sun, pulled up beside the fallen man. Their leader, a tall, broad-shouldered figure with weathered skin and a calm authority, stepped off his Harley. His name was Jake Riker, the president of the Iron Saints Motorcycle Club, men known for their loyalty, not their looks. Jake knelt beside Ethan and asked softly, "You okay, brother?" There was no judgment, no pity. Just concern. Ethan tried to explain through labored breaths, the diagnosis, the rejection, the feeling of being discarded by the world. Jake listened silently, then took off his leather jacket and placed it over Ethan's shoulders. "You're one of us now," he said firmly. "We'll handle this." Within hours, the Iron Saints were on the move. What began as one man's tragedy became a brotherhood's mission. That evening, the quiet streets of Albuquerque shook with the sound of engines as the bikers rolled up to the same clinic, a line of chrome and thunder under the desert moon. People stepped outside to watch, unsure whether to fear or applaud. Jake walked straight through the clinic doors, followed by his crew. No violence. No threats. Just a message. They were there to help one of their own. By morning, word spread across social media. The Iron Saints had started a charity ride for Ethan Cole, raising money for his treatment. Within 24 hours, donations poured in from across the country, truckers, veterans, and strangers who saw themselves in his struggle. Ethan's treatment began soon after, paid in full. The same clinic that had once turned him away now welcomed him back with smiles they never had before. But Ethan didn't hold on to bitterness. He often told the nurses, "Don't hate the system. Just fix it for the next guy." As chemotherapy coursed through his veins, Jake and his brothers visited often, sitting with him through the long nights, sharing stories of the road and hope beyond pain. For the first time in months, Ethan smiled again. He wasn't just a patient anymore, he was part of a family forged not by blood, but by compassion. Yet as the weeks passed and the sun rose again over the red deserts of New Mexico, Ethan felt a strange pull in his heart, as if something unfinished still waited out there in the dust and wind. Life had spared him once, and somewhere beyond the horizon, fate was preparing to test his heart again. 4 days later, Ethan Cole drove along the lonely highways of northern New Mexico, his window rolled down to let in the warm desert wind. The treatment was working, and for the first time in months, his chest no longer burned with pain. The world felt new again, the sky bluer, the air sharper, the silence no longer heavy but peaceful. He drove without destination, letting the road lead him wherever it wished. The desert stretched endlessly, painted gold by the setting sun. Every mile felt like a prayer of gratitude, gratitude for life, for the strangers who had saved him, and for the second chance he'd never thought he'd get. As he rounded a bend, something caught his eye, a small figure near the roadside, motionless against the dusty red earth. At first, he thought it was debris, maybe a blanket blown from a truck. But as he slowed the vehicle and drew closer, his heart began to race. It was a boy, no older than 8, barefoot and wrapped in a torn, dirt-streaked blanket. His skin was pale, lips cracked, eyes half open yet distant. Ethan pulled over, jumped out, and ran to the child, his pulse hammering in his ears. "Hey, kid, hey," he whispered, his hands trembling as he touched the boy's shoulder. The child's breathing was faint, almost lost in the desert wind. Ethan gently lifted him into his arms, the boy's head resting weakly against his chest. "Hang on, kid," Ethan murmured. "You're safe now." He drove as fast as his truck could carry them, straight toward the nearest hospital in Santa Fe. Nurses rushed out the moment they saw him carrying the boy inside. Within minutes, doctors surrounded the child, hooking him up to IVs and monitors. Ethan stood by, his heart heavy but hopeful. A nurse approached quietly and said, "He's Apache. No ID. No family listed anywhere." The words sank deep. Ethan's mind flashed back to the day he'd been turned away, alone and desperate. But unlike then, this boy would not face the world without help. For the next 2 days, Ethan stayed in the hospital room, sleeping on a chair beside the boy's bed, making sure he wasn't alone when he woke. When the boy finally opened his eyes, weak but alive, Ethan smiled through tears. "You're gonna be okay, little man," he said softly. Something inside Ethan shifted during those quiet hours, a deep realization that life had come full circle. The man who once begged for help now became the one offering it. Each time he brought food or spoke softly to the boy, he could feel a part of his old pain healing, as if fate had written this moment long before. Nurses noticed the bond forming, whispering among themselves about the man who never left the child's side. By the end of the second day, the boy was sitting up, nibbling on bread, eyes clearer, cheeks no longer hollow. When Ethan stepped out to breathe the evening air, he looked toward the horizon and thought about how kindness had found its way back to him. On the 4th day, Ethan returned home, exhausted yet peaceful. The house was quiet, the desert outside glowing beneath the orange twilight. Then came a gentle knock on his door. When he opened it, 3 women stood there, Apache women, wrapped in shawls, eyes shining with tears. One stepped forward, her voice trembling. "You found our nephew," she said softly. "We've been searching for him for days. The spirits must have guided you." Ethan's throat tightened as he invited them in. They hugged him, thanking him in their native tongue, their words carrying the weight of generations. For a long moment, no one spoke, the silence said it all. After
they left, Ethan stood at his doorway, staring out into the vast desert. The stars had begun to appear, one by one, glittering over the endless sky. He took a deep breath, the air cool and full of meaning. "Maybe kindness always finds its way back, one way or another," he murmured, his voice steady, filled with wonder. The wind carried his words into the open night, and for the first time, Ethan understood that every act of compassion, no matter how small, returns in ways the heart cannot always explain. Once a man left to die, he had become a symbol of hope. Proof that even in the harshest desert, humanity still blooms.